When Malcolm Carter clocked in for the night shift at the Carter Works plant at 9:58 on a Tuesday in October, he punched a time card under the name M. Boone, and the kid at the badge desk did not look up. The plant smelled like machine oil and floor wax, and the cold metal smell that big buildings get after the day people go home. Fluorescent lights hummed in long rows. A forklift beeped somewhere on the far dock. 4 championship rings sitting in a safe 4 states away. A net worth past $400 million. His own name bolted in steel letters on the front of the building he was about to mop. And not one person on that night shift knew it. Because the man pushing the bucket wore a gray work shirt, a ball cap pulled low, glasses he did not need, and a graying beard he had grown out for exactly this. And nobody on earth looks twice at a janitor. He had built this company with his own money in his own hometown, on the bones of the old plant where his father broke his body for 30 years. He had stepped back 3 years ago to run his foundation and let the executives he trusted run the floor. Then, a letter had reached him, an injured worker. A complaint nobody answered. So he grew a beard and took a mop, because he wanted to see the truth the way the truth actually lives, at midnight, from behind a bucket. He had been on the floor 11 minutes when he saw the first thing. A night manager named Doug came striding down the aisle toward an old man emptying bins, a thin black man in his 70s moving slow on a bad hip. "You missed the east stairwell again, Walter," Doug said loud, so the whole shift could hear. "You know what? I'm docking you. You're too slow. You're too old, and I'm tired of covering for you. You want to keep this job at your age. You move." The old man, Walter, said, "Yes, sir," quiet, and kept moving, and his hands shook a little on the bin, and the whole floor pretended not to watch. And Malcolm Carter stood 20 feet away with a mop in his hands and said absolutely nothing. But he did not go back to mopping. He stood very still, and his eyes moved across that floor slowly, the way a man reads a thing he is afraid to be reading right. And 3 things landed on him one after another, and he filed each one away. The first was on the wall by the break room. There was supposed to be a clinic there. He knew, because he had paid for it, a free on-site clinic for every worker and their family. The door was padlocked now. Executive storage printed on a sign taped over the glass. Beside it hung the framed poster for the Carter Works tuition fund, the one that put workers' kids through college on the company's dime. The frame was crooked and the glass was cracked, and somebody had stuck a parking notice over half of it. He looked at it for a long second. The second was the old man's lunch pail, sitting on a stool by the bins. A battered steel lunch pail, the old kind, dented soft at the corners from decades of use. And scratched into the lid in a shaky hand were 2 initials. S.C. Malcolm Carter stared at those 2 letters until his throat closed. Because he had seen that exact pail on the exact same kind of stool 1,000 mornings of his childhood, and the initials scratched in it were not Walter's. The third he did not see at first. He found it later, an hour into his shift, when he hauled a trash bag out of the upstairs offices and the bottom split and the contents spilled across the dock floor. Among the coffee cups and the shredded paper was a single report, not shredded, just crumpled. An incident report dated 4 months back. An injured worker, a guard that had been removed off a press to speed up the line, and stapled to it the termination paperwork for the man who got hurt, signed the same week. They had broken a man on a machine they made unsafe, and then they had fired him so he could not talk, and they had thrown the proof in the trash, and now the owner of the company was holding it in his janitor's gloves on his own loading dock at 1 a.m. Now here is the part that nobody on that night shift understood yet. The new janitor pushing the bucket, the big quiet man they called Boone, was Malcolm Carter. His name was on the building. The company was his. And the men in the corner offices, the ones he had trusted to run the place while he was away, had spent 3 years quietly tearing out everything he built it for. And they had no idea the owner had been emptying their trash all week, reading their secrets one bag at a time. But there was something else he did not know yet either. Something about that old man Walter and that battered lunch pail with the wrong initials scratched in the lid. A connection running back more than 20 years to a man in a grave that was going to turn this from a story about a company into something that took the legs out from under him entirely. So stay with us for the whole video, because what Malcolm Carter found in the trash that night ended careers by sunrise. But what he found out about the old janitor with the bad hip is the part that broke him. Malcolm Carter was born in this town, in a rented house 6 blocks from where the Carter Works plant now stood, and the man who raised him was his father, Samuel Carter. Big Sam, everybody called him, because the size ran in the blood. Sam worked the old Delacroix plant on this same ground for 30 years, on the line, on his feet, breathing what the line put in the air, and the company that owned it then treated the men on that floor like parts you replaced when they wore out. No clinic, no fund, no name remembered. Sam came home every night smelling of oil and went out every morning before light, and he did it for 30 years so his boy could have shoes that fit and a ball to shoot. Sam had one thing he used to say, and he said it so often it became the floor under Malcolm's whole life. He said it the day young Malcolm got cut from a team. He said it the night a coach disrespected him. He said it leaning in the doorway in his work clothes, too tired to sit, his hands wrapped in liniment. A company is not the men in the corner offices, son, Sam would say. It's the man emptying the trash at midnight. You want to know what a place is really made of, you don't look at the big shots. You look at how they treat the man nobody's watching. You remember that, especially if you ever get to be a big shot yourself. Sam did not live to see his boy become anything. The line took his lungs a piece at a time, the way it took all of them. And he died at 58 in a county hospital the same winter Malcolm signed his first contract, before there was money for a single good thing, before the boy could buy his father one easy day. On the last afternoon, Sam held his son's enormous hand in his cracked one and used most of his breath to repeat the only thing he had to leave him. The man nobody's watching. You treat him right. And Malcolm did. The day he had the money, he came home, and he bought the old Delacroix ground, and he tore the cruel plant down, and he built Carter Works on top of it, and he built it to be the exact opposite of what killed his father. A clinic, so no man ever again worked sick because he couldn't afford a doctor. A tuition fund, so the children of the line got the shoes that fit, and the future too. A living wage, written into the founding papers in language nobody was supposed to be able to undo. He did it all for a dead man. And then, trusting it would run itself, he stepped back to chase the foundation work, and he handed the keys to a man he believed in. That man was Lyle Brandt, and Lyle was the antagonist, and Lyle was not a cartoon. Malcolm had hired Lyle because Lyle was hungry in a way Malcolm recognized. Lyle had grown up the only poor kid in a rich school, had spent his whole childhood being the boy in the wrong shoes at the party, and had built his entire adult self around a single terror, the terror of ever being small or overlooked again. For a while that hunger made him excellent. Then the market got hard, and the numbers got tight, and the board wanted growth, and Lyle, who could not stand the thought of being the man who failed, started to find the money in the only places left. He looked at the clinic and saw a cost. He looked at the tuition fund and saw a line item. He looked at the living wage and saw the thing standing between him and the bonus that would finally make him feel like enough. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would put it all back once the numbers turned. He never put anything back. He padlocked the clinic and called it storage. He let a floor manager named Doug run the night shift on fear because fear was cheap. He buried an injured man's report because a lawsuit was a number 2, and he had stopped somewhere in there being able to see the men attached to the numbers at all. He was not a monster. He was a frightened boy in an expensive suit who had traded a dead man's whole purpose for the feeling of not being small. That does not excuse 1 second of it. It only explains it. The old man with the bad hip and the wrong initials on his lunch pail was named Walter Reese, and Walter was 73 years old, and Walter had known Big Sam Carter for 30 years. They had worked the old Delacroix line side by side. When Sam collapsed on the floor one August from the heat in the air, it was Walter who carried him out, and Walter who sat with him in the shade and shared his own water. They were that kind of friends, the kind the line makes, the kind that does not need a lot of words. The lunch pail with SC, scratched in the lid, had been Sam's, and Sam had given it to Walter the year he got sick, told him to carry it and think of him, and Walter had carried it to work every single day for 22 years since. When Carter Works opened on the old ground, Walter had wept in the parking lot, because he knew exactly whose company it was. Sam's boy, the long, tall kid he used to watch shoot in the lot, and he had applied not for charity and not for a desk, but for the humblest job they had, night janitor, because his pride would not let him ask Sam's son for a thing, and because he wanted, at the end of his working life, to push a broom across the floor that Sam's boy built to honor men like them. He never told anyone. He never asked for a thing. And for 3 years, in the company built as a monument to his old friend's dignity, Walter Reese had been getting docked and humiliated and called too old by a man named Doug. And the boy who built the place to stop exactly that from ever happening again had no idea, because he was away, trusting the corner offices. There were 2 more people on that floor who matter. One was Aisha, 24, a single mother who ran the number 3 press on nights, who had quietly slid half her own sandwich onto the new janitor's cart his first night because he looked like he hadn't eaten, who did that kind of thing without thinking. When Doug had docked Walter that night, it was Aisha who set down her work and said, out loud, in front of the whole floor, "That's not right, Doug. And you know it's not." Doug had written her up on the spot. She had 2 kids and that job was the whole roof over them, and she stood up for an old man anyway, because some people do the right thing exactly when it costs them the most. The other was Miss Dot, 68, who had run the badge desk since the day Carter Works opened, and who had badged Malcolm in 100 times back when he ran the place himself. Miss Dot was nobody's fool. The second the big new janitor handed her a time card under the name Boone, she had looked at his eyes over those fake glasses and known exactly who he was, and she had said not one single word, just stamped the card and slid it back. And every night that week she had watched him work the floor with a small private fire building in her chest, because Miss Dot had been trying to get someone upstairs to listen for 3 years, and now, at last, somebody was listening, and he had a mop in his hands. By the 4th night, Malcolm had it all. The trash had given him everything, the gutted programs, the buried injury, the bonuses, the fear. He had enough to end it in an hour. And then, the floor handed him the last piece itself. It was near 2 a.m. when Doug came down the aisle again, and this time he had Walter's write-up in his hand and a smile that meant he had decided something. "That's 3 this month, old man," Doug said. I warned you. You're done. Clean out your locker." And he reached over and he picked up the battered steel lunch pail off the stool to shove it at Walter's chest, careless. The way you handle a thing that means nothing to you. And Malcolm Carter, who had stood silent through 4 nights of it, who had planned to wait for morning and the lawyers and the clean professional ending, set down his mop. And the whole floor felt the air change, the way a yard goes cold when a cloud crosses the sun. But before you hear what he said, you need to feel the full weight of what he was looking at. Because he was not looking at a manager bullying an old janitor anymore. He was looking at his father's lunch pail, with his father's initials in the lid, in the careless hand of a man who was firing his father's best friend, on the floor he had built, so this could never happen. And 22 years of grief came up the back of his throat all at once. He crossed the floor in 4 strides. He took the steel pail out of Doug's hand, gentle, the way you take something holy, and he turned it over and looked at the 2 letters scratched in the lid, S.C. And then he looked at the old man, really looked, and the years fell off the face. And he knew. "Where did you get this pail?" Malcolm said, and his voice was not the janitor's voice anymore. Walter blinked at him. "It was my friend's," the old man said. "Long time ago. Sam Carter, best man I ever knew, worked beside me 30 years on this same ground before all this. He gave it to me when he got sick. I've been carrying him ever since." His eyes narrowed at the big bearded janitor. "How come you ask?" Malcolm Carter took off the ball cap. He took off the glasses. He stood up to his full height in the middle of the night shift, and Miss Dot at the badge desk finally let out the breath she had been holding for 4 nights, and a young woman at the number 3 press dropped a wrench, and Doug, the night manager, went the color of paper. "Because Sam Carter was my father," Malcolm said. "And this is my company. And you, sir, are the man my daddy told me to carry on his last day alive. What happened by sunrise is the part the title promised you." Lyle Brandt was in the building by 7 a.m., summoned, and he walked into his own glass office to find the owner sitting behind the desk in a janitor's gray shirt with a stack of trash-rescued evidence squared on the blotter. Malcolm fired him. He fired Doug. He fired the small ring of executives who had padlocked the clinic and buried the injury and turned a monument to a working man into a place that ground working men down. They were not dragged out for cameras. There were no cameras. They were simply, quietly, completely done, every one of them, by lunch. But Malcolm did one thing with Lyle that nobody expected. Before he let him go, he made him stand in front of the padlocked clinic. And he told him the whole story of a boy in the wrong shoes who grew up so afraid of being small that he made an entire company small to feel big. And he told Lyle he understood that fear better than Lyle would ever believe. And then he said the hardest kind thing a man can say to another. He said Lyle still had time to become someone his own father would carry, but not here, and not on Walter Reese's back. He gave him the truth instead of revenge, and he let him walk out with it, which is a heavier thing to carry than disgrace. He reinstated the injured worker with back pay and an apology in his own hand. He tore the padlock off the clinic that morning himself. He restored the tuition fund and wrote the living wage back into the bones of the company in language even he could not undo next time. He found Aisha at the number 3 press, the young mother who had stood up for an old man knowing it could cost her everything, and he tore up her write-up and made her the night floor's lead and told her the children of people who do right when it costs them get their college handled, both of hers, all the way. He thanked Miss Dot, who had known him from the first second and guarded it, and asked her to never stop being the one person in the building who was nobody's fool. And Walter Reese, 73, who had pushed a broom in silent pride across the floor his best friend's son had built, never pushed another one. Malcolm did not fire him, and he did not pension him off into a quiet apartment to disappear. He named the plant floor the Samuel Carter floor, and he stood Walter up at the dedication beside him, and he told 1,000 workers that this old man had carried his father out of the heat with his own arms and carried his memory in a steel lunch pail for 22 years, and that as long as Carter Works stood, Walter Reese had a place of honor in it and a hand to shake at the door. Then he gave the old man back the pail. A father, 22 years gone, whose one rule built a whole company. A friend who carried him in silence and got ground down inside the monument. A young mother who risked her only roof for a stranger. An old woman at a desk who saw the truth and waited. A frightened man in an expensive suit, fired, but handed a mirror and a road instead of a grave. His father had been right, standing in that doorway in his work clothes all those years ago. You do not learn what a place is made of from the corner offices. You learn it at midnight, from behind a bucket, watching how they treat the man nobody is watching. Malcolm Carter had to become that man for 4 nights to remember it. For 4 nights, in his own building, he was the man nobody was watching. And what he saw got everyone fired. You judge a place by how it treats the man nobody sees. So do me a favor before you go. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us about the hardest working person you ever knew who never once got thanked for it. If Walter and that old steel lunch pail put something in your chest, hit that like button. Not for us, but for every man and woman who gave a company 30 years and got treated like a part to be replaced. Subscribe and join this family. Because we tell the stories of the people in the gray shirts at midnight, the ones the corner offices forget, and there are more of them coming. There's another one waiting on your screen right now, and it just might be the one you needed today. Go on. We'll see you there.